Hi, this is another video in Sandspear installation series brought to you by sandspears.com.au. And this one is all about how to set your sandspear to the correct depth, ensuring that you will have plentiful of water. First, we're going to have a look at the issues that can occur. And one of them is a vortex, and this is where you've got air coming into the system and the sandspear is not set below what we call the static water level. And here is a technical description of what a vortex. It's a fluid dynamic. Vortex is a region in a fluid in which the flow revolves around an axis and a line. Now, this gets to some deep physics, and it's caused by the differential pressures. But basically, we really don't care about that. What we do care about is that we're getting air into our system. And by placing the sandspear in the correct position and depth below the waterline, then this can be avoided. And this vortex is, as we discussed, as I said before, is allowing air to enter the pumping system. Instead of having a completely full flow of water, you are getting this just a bit of a drip. And that's not, you don't want to put all that hard work in just to get a drip. What else do you need to know? Well, there are two main parts to this. One is what we call the static water level, and the other one is the drawdown level. Now, the static water in this picture is the distance from the ground to where you first hit water. And that is, you'll find that when you're drilling or installing it, no matter how you do it, you will see that you've hit some water. And there are many ways to find this out. Usually if you're baling, you will just see that the sand goes from dry to wet. And if you're washing it in, you will see the water coming up to the level inside the sandspear or your casing here. And that is the distance from the top of the soil to where you strike your water. Now, your drawdown level is the distance the water table drops when pumping from your sandspear or bore. Now, this can be a little bit difficult to measure, and you do this when you can do a pump test, but you've got to have it all in the system and installed first. So that's what makes this a little bit difficult, but we can look at the ways of measuring that a little bit later on. And as I said, only measured when the pump is running. Now, the tools for measuring and the way we can measure this, as you can see, we have an air tube. This is where you put an air tube down. You have a little gauge. You can have an electronic data logger. You can just use your eye. Quite often when it's only a shallow bore like a sandspear, you can see the water level. You can use a fox whistle. That is a little whistle that when you lower into water, it makes a noise. You can use a stick with a string and a float and tape measure. Some of the electronics in the air tube, they're used by professional drillers, and in a case of a sandspear, you probably would never use it, just too expensive. So they're the things that you can use for measuring the drawdown. And of course, the other difficult when you're using the drawdown is that if you've got your suction line inside your casing, there is not much room for you to measure it. Quite often, the only way to tell is when you run out of water. And we'll discuss that a little bit later. Now, to avoid this air problem, you need to set your screen and your suction line to the correct depth. One of the theory is that you set whatever the water table is when you hit the water, is that your screen, the top of your screen must be at least 800 millimeter below that to avoid all these air. Now, some of the drillers that I know that have put in systems, they've had to go up to 2 meters. So 800 millimeter is definitely the minimum. I used to think 600, but not anymore. I now say 800. Or as I said, you may have to go to 2 meters above. The more water you have above the top of your screen or the top of your suction line, the less chance there is of running out of water. Now, what we got here is avoiding air, and you can avoid air by obviously setting it to the correct depth, making sure that you've got enough water But also, one of the things we're going to look at just in a minute is you may not have enough supply in the ground. The ground conditions, your pump might be able to pump 2 litres a second, but your ground conditions might only allow you to pump half a litre a second. So when you're pumping, what you're going to see is that your static water, all of a sudden the drawdown water just goes whew, and we've seen this before, that it's actually pumping over the ground conditions. And unfortunately, no one knows what your ground conditions are until you go and drill a hole, because who knows what's underneath the ground. The ground is very tricky. What your neighbours have is not always what you have. Conditions that I've seen change in meters. They don't change in miles. The good thing is having sand is that there's less chance of it changing dramatically, but we have seen it. So again, getting your depth right, making sure that it's not over pumping the ground condition will ensure that water can't come in and down in here. And that way you're ensuring that full pipe of water, not having that air. And you'll see that if you are pumping and you're testing later, you will actually hear the noise if it starts running low. Now, how do you know you're getting air? Well, you'll be able to see that it starts splurting. You'll hear an air noise. You'll go from a full pipe to maybe half a pipe, and then it'll just start spitting. It'll be very obvious that you're having air. What is the correct depth to set your screen? There are a lot of theories about this. I used to say 600 millimeter minimum, but now I like to see 800 millimeter above your screen. So if that's there as your top, and that's your water table here, that's your static water level, the red line, then a minimum of 800 millimeters. We have seen drillers who are professionally installing Sandspears, and other people, they've got to go to 2 meters. So 2 meters from the top of the water to the top of the screen to ensure that you're not going to have that vortex and you're not going to have that air. So you may have to go that distance. And again, it really depends on your conditions. Now, testing for drawdown level. This is the drawdown level, as discussed before, is we go from the static water level here, and that's where the water is over this picture, to over here where the water comes down once you've pumping. Right? So, and we've talked about testing it. Now, you can test it using your own pump. What you need to do is install a tap on the outlet side so that you can stop the water and restrict it. All right, so you're going to insert your suction line down your casing, down here in your casing, and then you can insert your non-return valve if that's what your method you're using, which I recommend. Now, if you're using the 25 millimeter, it won't fit inside the Sandspear, but that's okay. You just put it to the top of the Sandspear, and if it fits inside, well, you can go inside. I don't recommend sitting it on the bottom, because if any fines do come in, they settle on the bottom. So at least have 100 millimeter from the bottom of your Sandspear if you can get your non-return valve in there. Then prime your pump, as I normally do. Now what you're going to do is you can close your pump tap down completely, not completely, just right down. So it's and then just back it, open it up a little bit. Then you're going to turn your pump on, all right. And then what you're going to do, you're going to slowly open your tap over a period of time, and turn your tap on till full. Now, if your the water supply is enough, then maybe your tap can be fully open. But what you're going to find is you're going to get a steady flow of water, and then as you're opening it up, let's say it's halfway, and then all of a sudden you hear those gurgles and you hear the air. You know that you're getting air into the system, and that your pump won't be able to, the bore won't be able to supply that much water. In this case, back the tap down a little bit until you start getting a full stream, and then you've got it set right. Now, if the supply is not enough, then what people have done is they go and buy a tank, and over a slower period of time, they fill the tank up, with water, and then when it's full or there's enough there, then they water the garden or use that water, and they may even have a second pump if you need another pump, or you can use gravity. That depends on your situation, but that's what a lot of people have to do, because the Sandspear, unfortunately, or the system won't supply enough water for a high pressure pump. So you're in the situation that your water has now stopped and you're getting air. What can you do? As discussed, you can lower the tap down and just pump minimum to fill a tank, then you can pump out. Or what many people have done is they've gone back, pulled out their Sandspear, and or just kept further going, and they've installed it at a lot deeper, like as I discussed before, maybe these 2 meters of static water level above the screen. Maybe that's what you have to do. You can give that a shot. You know how to install because you've already got to that depth. Go a little bit further, and if there's no success, then you've got no choice but to fill up and run at a lot slower amount of water than what you really wanted. Unfortunately, the ground can only supply what it does. Now, here's a typical ground condition. This is the ocean, there's your topsoil, your sand and your aquifer, and then the clay. So this is where you install your Sandspear, and the water is going to come down here. Now, as I always say, remember, when purchasing or installing your Sandspear, suit to purpose, decide on your drilling method, the screen to match the gravel, check on your council regulations, choose your best position, keep it away from septic tanks and places like that, and look, decide on the amount of water, but that is usually determined by the bore, not you. And always try to avoid mud, soil, driving of the PVC screens, they won't take it, deeper than 3 meters, air leaks, and screen above the aquifer. We also supply lots of components and accessories that can help you install when you're installing your Sandspear. And we solve your Sandspear installations and pumping challenges with trust and integrity. Been doing this for a long time. We wish you luck with your Sandspear installation. May you have boundless quantities of good fresh water. And if you need any more answers, have any more questions, please feel free to contact us in one of these ways here. Our email is our phone number, or go to our website, and don't forget to sign up as a member if you haven't already done that. And thank you very much for watching this presentation.